With the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, we now have 9 starters for each typing. So today, I am going to sit down and rank all 9 grass starters from Bulbasaur to Spriggato, from the worst to the best. Alright, so going into this, it's actually a top 10, thanks to Decidueye getting a Hisuian form, and that will be the same thing for the other two types of starters, fire and water, because of Typhlosion and Samurott getting Hisuian forms as well. And I figure they're different enough where I'll actually count them as separate. Mega Evolutions and Gigantamax, on the other hand, they'll be considered with the base form of the Pokemon, and I will typically just be interchanging between the final form and the base form. So, like, for example, I'll be alternating between Trico and Sceptile. So, just as, like, a point of reference, it'll basically be swapping in between the two of them, except for Spriggato, because I haven't put enough time in this Scarlet and Violet yet as the time of this recording. Without further ado, let's get started. And the other two will be up tomorrow and then the day after. So, Saturday and Sunday, those will be out. Let's get started. In last place, we have Spriggato. I do know, I saw Final Evolutions, I saw the spoilers way beforehand. Why? Why they make this thing a bipedal fucking Pokemon? Honestly, otherwise, like, this thing would have been perfect. This probably would have been way higher. It probably would have overtaken, it probably would have been up to, like, 6 or 7. But they decided to make it bipedal. That alone really, really hurts it. This could have been one of the most badass looking starters ever. This thing could have literally been a saber-toothed tiger. For those of you who don't know, most of the grass starters have the trend of being based off of a prehistoric animal. Whether or not it's actually true is still up for debate, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate until we get to Spriggato, which I guess is kind of the trend now, is that all of them are getting the nip. Because we'll talk about it more with fire starters, but obviously there was a huge theory going on for a bit, and now it's very much nipped in the butt. But that, plus on top of its typing, Grass Dark is a really weird typing. It's not a bad typing, I mean, it's a bad typing, but it's a weird typing. Being quad weak to the weakest type is weird, but there's a lot of just common types nowadays that you're weak to. You're weak to fighting, you're weak to you're weak to fire, you're weak to flying, you're weak to fighting, 3 of the most common types, and then you're weak to the strongest type in the game, and Fairy. Overall, like, as a competitive player, I don't see this thing seeing any play. As a, like, in-game player, as a guy who, like, just tries to rate it off its designs, this thing is a total misfire in my opinion. Next up, we have Chikorita. Overall, it's just a bland starter. It's the one that had to follow up Bulbasaur, and it's the Pokemon that had to follow up the original 151, and that's a very, very hard thing for it to do. Chikorita, overall, as a Pokemon, has been pretty neglected, and it's a Pokemon that I feel deserves actually more love than it actually gets. The fact of the matter is that Johto, as a region, is very Kanto. It's very much just It's very much just Kanto Kanto 2.0. Even though it doesn't feel like it. And that's what makes it really weird, is because, like, aside from ROM hacks, because ROM hacks decided to be like, let's make this thing just stupid OP. Basically, any ROM hack that has, like, introduced the fairy typing, gives it the fairy typing, and then gives it, like, just this extra little boost in some way that makes it really, really good. And then in its region itself, it's got one good notable matchup, and that's against, Chuck. That's the 5th or 6th or 7th gym. It is one of the latest gyms you can do. And that's not pleasant. It really isn't. It's being that type, being that late in the generation is not a great thing. Again, I got no issues with Chikorita as a Pokemon, but, like, overall, it's just that Pokemon that exists. It is, competitively speaking, it's the worst starter. In game playthrough speaking, it's the worst starter, because it has nothing going for it. It has, its first 2 gyms it's weak to the first 2 gyms. Everybody struggles against every trainer, unless you get the Machamp or the Machop, struggles against Whitney. And then he struggles against Morty. Steelix sucks. Steel types are the bane of its existence. And again, only Chuck's Poliwrath. It's one Pokemon, really. In the Elite Four, it fares a little bit better, but even still, like, by that point, you have a full team that can try and fill out all of its weaknesses, but you gotta literally fill out every single one of its weaknesses before the second gym. And that's hard to do. That's really, really hard to do. In 8th place, we've got Chespin. It's one of those Pokemon. It was really close. It's like the cusp of being like phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's one of those Pokemon that I truly do believe like it was maybe an inch away from being perfect. And it created this really weird format in UU where it was paired up with, I think it was Rotom Heat and Empoleon for the Gen 6 era of UU as like a trio of Pokemon that could just kind of fuck everything up. And it was good in that moment, and then it just kind of kept falling more and more down the line. Bulletproof is a niche ability at best. Like, yeah, it protects it from one of its big weaknesses in the form of Sludge Bomb, but that's about it. It doesn't help that there are other grass fighting types that I feel do the job better. Breloom exists, and with Technician and Poison Heal, it's obviously just, in general, has a better move pool, has better ways to use the fighting type and the grass type together. And then, while he's not quite there yet, we're assuming that another Pokemon will be doing better. Speaking of the other grass fighting start. Next up, we got Hisuian Decidueye. This is a strange situation where I'm theorizing right now this thing is going to be a monster, or at least it would be if that speed stat was higher. And this is an issue that I'm going to talk about, again, with Decidueye later down the list, but it bears mentioning that it's got the weirdest stat distribution ever. Now, with Scrappy, this makes it a very, very powerful Pokemon because it can attack ghost types. One thing that fighting types always have struggled against is hitting ghost types for any type of damage. And that means really the only Pokemon it's got to really fear that's like a ghost type now is like the Gengar line or like a ghost flying type like Drifloon. And even then, like by that point you're switching it out. But again, it's one of those Pokemon that it theorized to be good. I just don't think the design of it works really well. I like the autumn design of it, and I like how basically whenever they get their shinies, they just kind of they go back to the originals, and that's a really cool way to do shinies. And I think that's the right way to do the regional variant shinies. But as a Pokemon, it's not there yet. It really isn't. And it's a shame that it's not there yet, because it's one of those Pokemon that I feel it's right there on the cusp of greatness, just like Chespin. But until then, I think the greatest the grass fighting Pokemon that will reign supreme is still the original, and that's Breloom. Alright, next up we got Rowlet. I do think the ghost typing works. It's just a tad bit better than the fighting type again. Ghost is a better offensive typing, plus the immunity. It's better defensive and offensive type. Well, not offensive, because fighting is offense ahoy, but it is the better defensive typing. Having 2 immunities is definitely a better thing. However, ability wise, like Overgrow or Long Reach, and Long Reach is cool. It's a cool, unique ability that fits perfectly with him, but it's that, and then it's stat distribution. Like, man, this thing should be the fastest it should be the fastest of the Alola starters. And like, they're all like, I think he is still the fastest, but by 5 points, 5 base points. Come on, this thing's gotta be like, if I were designing it, I would have nicked that 100 special defense that it has, or that 100 special attack that it has. I would have put it straight into speed. That thing seemed like a Pokemon that would be fast. It's an Archer, so it should be relatively fast, seeing as like Archers throughout history have been seen to be like lightweight fighters. Like they've been seen to be the lightweight fighters. They're not Pokemon, they're not like there, but no, it's just weird. It's a weird Pokemon with a weird stat distribution, and it's adorable. Like, I'm well aware that everybody loves Rowlet. There are just things about Rowlet and the Rowlet line that make me a little off. And, I mean, obviously, Dartrix is just weird. He's literally just weird. He's a very, very weird Pokemon. He's very much the edgelord of the group, and I'm like, that's not... Oh, what? Like, I get it, he's the weird middle stage, and that's fine and all, but there's a lot of things to talk about with this Pokemon, and there's a lot to talk about with every starter Pokemon, though, and that's why I can't, like, give out my whole rant out on this one Pokemon, because I gotta spread it out, you know? There's a lot to talk about with this Pokemon, and there's a lot to talk about with every starter Pokemon, though, and that's why I can't, like, give out my whole rant out on this one Pokemon, because I gotta spread it out, you know? There's a lot to talk about with this Pokemon, and there's a lot to talk about with every starter Pokemon, because I gotta spread it out, you know? But let's move on to the next one. All right, next up we got Grookey, and this is a huge step in the right direction. While many of the grass starters in more recent gens, taking a look at Spriggato, Chespin, and Decidueye specifically, they all have more human characteristics. And let's not beat around the bush here. Rillaboom carries a giant fucking drum. But it's a monkey. You can kind of make the excuse that it's a monkey, and like it works. It works really well. It works very, very well. The only thing that really doesn't jive with me is its Gigantamax form. That takes it a little far, but Grookey's adorable, Thwacky's pretty cool, and then Rillaboom is just, he's fun, and he did something that very few pure grass types can do, and make an impact into not just one, but both formats of competitive play. It's something that really, and it had to be done, and it had to be done only through one, and it could only have been done through one thing, and that's its ability in tandem with Grassy Glide, and that's a huge boon to it, and it's also just a cool Pokemon in general. I do like the theming of Gen 8 where they're all different forms of entertainers and not just like the circus troupe of Alola. They're all different types of entertainers where like one is an actor, one is a sports player, and then one is a musician. I love that. I think it's very cool theming for those starters, and also it's a fun set of starter Pokemon, and Grookey is probably my favorite, although it's hard to really say between him and Scorbunny. But again, he's being pure grass. It's just one thing, and again, that Gigantamax form, it just does not do it for me. Nope. All right, next up we got Bulbasaur, and Bulbasaur, I mean, he might not be he's Pokemon number one, and while he's not number one on this list, he did set the groundwork for not just all the grass starters. He set the groundwork for every fucking starter following. He is one of the most influential Pokemon probably ever. Like him, Bulbasaur, him, Squirtle, Charmander, the three most iconic starter Pokemon ever. Obviously, that's the reason they always get so much love, and Charizard gets a little bit more than it does. And it never really feels like it's losing where it's going. Like Bulbasaur, and then it starts to bloom a little bit, and then Ivysaur, and then in Venusaur, he finally like gets there. And man, his Mega and like Gigantamax form, I don't know why, I find them funny. I do. I really like the Gigantamax form. He's a Pokemon that looks like he is fucking stoned, and that's fitting for grass-type starter Pokemon. That's fitting for grass-type Pokemon, and just in general. And then from his Mega, the flower on the butt's fucking cheesy. Obviously, it's cheesy, but it works for me, and it works for me. It works. It was just a Pokemon that, like, every time he's, like, you think he's not going to see competitive play, he somehow finds a way to make it into, like, the higher tiers of competitive play. Obviously, in Gen 5, when he got the hidden ability for Chlorophyll and Weather Wars were abound, he was basically a staple on the Sun team because he was a fast, hard-hitting Pokemon that could just spam Solar Beam like it's nobody's business, holding the Black Sludge, and Giga Draining everything out of the solar system, and synthesizing everything out of the solar system. And then obviously the Mega Evolution gave him Thick Fat, which again, it revitalized him just a little bit more. And obviously you can even run him on the Sun team with Charizard, with Zardwai. He works very well with Charizard as a Pokemon. These two very much complement each other. It's a shame that Blastoise really doesn't complement them, and using those three all on one team is very, very awkward. But he is absolutely the Pokemon that set the gold standard for not just grass starters, but all starters in general. And I can't really, like, say anything bad about him. Like, he's always been, like, one of those Pokemon, you know? He's that Pokemon that, like, he might not be my favorite, but I love him. I love him. I'm not even going to beat around the bush and say that Bulbasaur is not one of the coolest Pokemon ever created. And the fact that it's just there, it's one of the coolest Pokemon. But ranting aside, obviously I've got a lot of ranting to do about other Kanto starters in later videos and other starter Pokemon, because obviously we have 3 more to talk about. So let's talk about those 3. But before we do, I would like to remind you that if you guys are enjoying this new type of content, I'm trying something new. This is like kind of heavily edited and like scripted work that I don't like to do. Scripting is hard. I've learned this today. I learned this while making these scripts. It's very hard. Please remember to like and subscribe, and it helps the videos go a long way. And while you're at it, share your opinions on your grass starters, on the best grass starters. My list isn't the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to hear yours. Anyway, let's move on to number 3. In third place, we have Trico. This starter has always felt cool, and if I'm being honest, Hoenn is probably my favorite set of starter Pokemon. But besides that, it's a great line. Then they're also just they're all just great. Even Grovyle, where everybody's like, oh, it's the awkward middle child. No, this is the one awkward middle child that fucking works, man. I'm sorry. It's the only one that really works. Not Charmeleon. None of them. None of them. None of the other grass starters work as well as this one does. Bayleaf obviously works for a different reason because of the anime. Grovyle works as a standalone Pokemon and has always worked well as a standalone Pokemon. Not only that, he got a pretty badass Mega Evolution. I know people always poke fun of the Christmas trees, but I like it. I think it worked very well for him. And giving him that Dragon typing, finally completing the the dual typing for all of the starter Pokemon worked very well. And obviously giving it a pretty decent ability is really good. As well, like back in the day, he had the signature move of Leaf Blade, which I probably is up there as one of the coolest signature moves ever. Nowadays, obviously, a lot of more Pokemon get it, but it's something that is always pretty kept, and that has kept itself there. And again, Trico's they've always been cool. I've always loved them all. They were all pretty cool Pokemon, and I think that's why they like realized, oh yeah, this is going to be Ash's ace for Hoenn, because it kind of had to be his ace for Hoenn. Taking our runner-up is the Smug Leaf himself, Mr. Snivy, and the Snivy line in general. This was a Pokemon I instantly fell in love with when I first started playing Black and White. Back when I was first, like, getting into Black and White news and, like, hearing all of the Fakemon news and all the new news and, like, hearing about all the Pokemon. I could not wait to get my hands on this game. This was literally probably my most anticipated game, and I played the hell out of this game. And just because of it, and I did pick Snivy, it was the Pokemon I picked, and I like it to this day. I instantly fell in love with it. It's got a sleek regal design paired up with one of my favorite types, even if grass isn't actually a great offensive type. And to add into that, it single-handedly made you know you're good when your ability single-handedly turns you into a competitive monster. Snivy's ability, contrary, is busted, to say the least. It's a very, very powerful move ability, and the Pokemon that get it, you tend to try and find a way to abuse its power quite a bit. And this is one of those Pokemon that, I think this is the Pokemon that uses it best, just because it's already got a decent amount of natural bulk with its defenses. It's got good speed, so you don't really have to worry about boosting its speed. It's just you got to raise up one of its attacking stats, and it just so happens to get Leaf Storm, which happens to be Nasty Plot now. Yeah, that's pretty good. And I distinctly remember hearing that its abilities basically turned it into a meta threat overnight. It was a Pokemon that very much just became a check to Rotom Wash, and Rotom Wash has always been a threat, and it still probably will be in the future. But it's one of those Pokemon that I've thoroughly enjoyed every time I've used it, and there's never really been a bad time I've never enjoyed using it. In fact, I remember two of my fondest memories with the Snivy line is they were my last Pokemon against both Berg and Elisa, and they beat both of them. Not quite sure how that works as Servine, obviously, but like I loved him. I still love him to this day, and I still have that Superior sitting in Pokemon Home, waiting for her to come home. But first place is the Turtwig line. Turtwig is not only my favorite grass starter, not only my favorite starter Pokemon, but he's my favorite. But they're my favorite Pokemon overall, and it reminds me of why I just love this franchising, combining cute, cool myths, legends from all throughout the world. And it's just a great design. Uniquely typing, not only if it's the best, but seriously, there's not a single other grass ground type yet. That might have changed with Scarlet and Violet. I'm not super aware. I'm trying to stay relatively spoiler free, and I'm actually recording this before Scarlet and Violet's release. Go figure. But it's got just a unique typing, even if it's not the best typing. Like, obviously, Quad Weak to Ice sucks because everybody's got fucking Dragon types, and so Ice is one of those types you just carry on you. But man, it is a type. It's a Pokemon that I've always been very nostalgic for, even if it wasn't actually my first Pokemon. It's the Pokemon I've had with me the longest. It's the Pokemon that has stuck with me the longest. I should be more specific. Obviously, I've done multiple. Obviously, my first Pokemon. We'll talk about it in a different video coming up very soon. But this was a Pokemon that I picked for myself, and I still thoroughly enjoy every time I use a Torterra on my team. I'm gonna have a good time because I know he's my favorite. I know I can never do him. I know they can never do me any wrong, and I know that they're fun. They're great. They're fantastic Pokemon. They're some of the coolest Pokemon ever created, and obviously with cool myths, cool lore, cool design, and a fucking adorable little base form. Obviously, Grottle's probably my least favorite out of the three, but even then, like, Grottle isn't that bad. He's pretty derpy, but he's a good branching off point from between the two. And that's why he comes in at number 1. Alrighty, guys, and don't forget to come back tomorrow when I'm ranking all the fire starters, and then come back on Sunday when I'm ranking all the water starters. I'll see you guys tomorrow for that, and then see you guys Sunday for the water. Peace out.